The chain fell to the dirt at 7:46 a.m. The French Bulldog stood there blinking, neck bleeding, no color for the first time in 3 years. Margaret was already in her truck with the engine running. The owner wouldn't find out for another 4 hours. Let me tell you how a 72-year-old grandma pulled this off right under his nose. 3 years ago, that French Bulldog was a puppy. Cute little thing. Brindle coat, big bat ears, wiggly butt. The owner brought him home in a cardboard box. I watched from my window. You'd never guess what that dog would look like later. But here's the thing. The trouble didn't start on day one. The owner was a retired vet assistant, knew exactly what he was doing. So when he put a chain on that puppy, he called it training. I didn't know any better yet. None of us did. Margaret hadn't even moved in next door. So the dog spent his first 6 months running around. Then something changed. Guess what? The owner started shortening the chain every few weeks. First, the dog could reach the whole yard, then half the yard, then just a circle of dirt. By month 8, that French Bulldog couldn't reach the fence anymore. I watched the water bowl sit empty for 3 days straight. You're not going to believe this part. The owner still filled the food bowl, just out of reach. So the dog would stretch, strain, choke himself trying to get 2 more inches. And the owner? He'd stand in the doorway and watch. Margaret moved in across the dirt road during month 9. First thing she asked me was, "Who owns that dog?" I told her. She didn't say anything else, just nodded. That's when I knew. Margaret is 72 years old, 5'7", steel-toed boots. She's got a grown son in Little Rock who calls her every Sunday. She's not a hero. She's not a cop. She's a grandma who got tired of watching. Let's be real for a second. She tried doing things the right way first. She called the sheriff in month 10, then again in month 11, then again. I counted 47 times across 2 years. Each time the sheriff came out, the owner pulled the dog inside. No chain visible, dog looked fine, so the sheriff left. Margaret realized something that day. The law wasn't going to help, so she decided to help herself. Now, just because she stopped calling the sheriff doesn't mean she stopped watching. Margaret bought a birdhouse at Walmart for $12, hung it on her fence facing the dog's yard. Inside that birdhouse was a camera. The owner never looked up, never noticed. For 2 solid years, Margaret recorded everything. She got footage of the chain tightening, the dog's neck raw, the water bowl frozen in winter, the owner kicking the dog out of the way. Margaret had enough evidence to put the guy away for animal cruelty. But here's what she told me. "Donna, evidence doesn't cut a chain. Bolt cutters do." I'll never forget her face when she said that. She'd already bought them. By year 3, the chain had worn through the dog's fur, then the skin, then it started cutting into muscle. You could see a half-inch groove around his neck, raw, wet, flies landing on it in summer. The French Bulldog stopped barking around month 20. Not because he couldn't, because he'd given up. But here's the thing about French Bulldogs. They're stubborn. One morning, I saw him drag his water bowl toward himself using his paw. Took him 45 minutes. He moved it 2 inches. The owner came out and kicked the bowl back to where it started. Wow. Margaret saw that through her birdhouse camera. She called me that night, said, "Tomorrow's the day." I asked her why tomorrow. She said, "Because I can't watch one more." The owner left for work every Tuesday at 7:34 a.m. Not 7:33, not 7:35, 7:34. Margaret watched this for 3 months before she made her move. She knew his truck sound, knew which way he turned, knew he wouldn't come back until 5:15 because he always stopped for beer on the way home. That's 9 hours and 41 minutes of empty property. So here's what Margaret did. She bought bolt cutters at a pawn shop 50 miles away, paid cash, wore gloves, no receipt. She practiced on scrap chain in her backyard for 2 weeks. Her neighbors probably thought she lost her mind, but then again, she didn't care. She told me, "Donna, my hands need to know what to do when the time comes." The time came on Tuesday. November 15th, 7:34 a.m. The owner's truck pulled out of the driveway. Margaret was already standing at her fence. Steel-toed boots, yellow rubber gloves, bolt cutters hanging from her tool belt. She didn't rush. She walked across that dirt road like she was going to get her mail. That's the part that got me. No running, no hiding. The dog saw her coming, didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood there with that chain digging into his neck. Margaret walked right up to him, squatted down. She didn't pet him, didn't talk to him. She just looked at the chain. Then she picked up the bolt cutters. I watched from my window with my hand over my mouth. Here's what I saw next. Margaret put the bolt cutters on that logging chain. Took her 2 tries to line it up right because her hands were shaking. She leaned her whole body weight into the handles. 72 years old, 165 pounds. And then that chain snapped. The sound carried across the road. I heard it through my double-pane window. The chain fell to the dirt. The dog didn't move for 3 full seconds, just stood there blinking. Margaret dropped the bolt cutters, grabbed the chain by the links, and slid it over the dog's head. No pulling, no yanking. The chain came off like a necklace. And then the dog wagged his tail. First time in 27 months. Margaret picked him up like a baby and walked to her truck. 7:46 a.m., 11 minutes and 30 seconds from start to finish. Margaret put that French Bulldog on the passenger seat of her Ford F-150. No crate, no leash, just a towel she brought from home. The dog laid his head on her thigh. She backed out of the driveway like she was going to the grocery store. And you know what? She was going to the vet. She drove 45 minutes to a clinic in the next county, paid cash for an emergency exam. The vet pulled 14 pieces of embedded chain link out of that dog's neck. Took 2 hours. Margaret sat in the waiting room the whole time, filled out the paperwork under her son's name. When the vet asked where she got the dog, she said, "He followed me home." The vet didn't ask again. 5:15 p.m., the owner pulled into his driveway. No dog, no chain, just an empty circle of dirt and a snapped padlock. He screamed for 20 minutes, called the sheriff, filed a report, said someone stole his property. The sheriff drove out, looked at the neck wound in the photos Margaret sent anonymously, then looked at the owner, then drove away. The owner never got that dog back. Margaret kept him in her spare bathroom for 3 weeks while the neck healed. Then she drove him to a rescue 2 hours away, adopted him herself the same day using her late husband's signature stamp. That French Bulldog sleeps on her bed now. The owner lost his gun license. And me, I never told a soul. Until now. So, you made it to the end of this story. That French Bulldog's name is Gus now. Margaret sends me photos every month. He's got a little red sweater and a bed by the wood stove. You'd never know he spent 3 years on a chain. But here's what I want you to think about. The owner still lives in that trailer, still leaves for work at 7:34, still has empty circles of dirt in his yard. Some people don't change. But one grandma did, and she didn't need a badge or a court order, just bolt cutters and a Tuesday morning. Here's my question for you. Would you have done the same? Not should you. Would you? Type your answer in the comments. And if you want to see what happened when Mateo confronted his brother at the casino, click that video right there. That one's even crazier.